This world doesn't need a hero. It needs a professional.
Hey there guys, what is happening? Today we're going to be talking about The Witcher 3. This has been a long time coming. Let's get into it. Does Witcher 3 deserve the hype that it's got? It's a monster of a title, mind the pun. Let's talk aspects of the game and see if it's worth its salt. The combat system is really intuitive. There are two types of melee in The Witcher 3, fistfights and weapon-based. The weapons consist of crossbows, the dual-wielded swords. Geralt can choose a long sword or a short sword. Either way, he feels like a monster slayer should, overpowered with all types of weapons. The crossbow is interesting because it allows you to have a distance combat fight, so you could do damage in range to certain monsters that you don't want to get up close to and then finish them off with the sword. Geralt can use a range of spells to his advantage in fights. Igni is an example that is on screen at the moment. Allows for you to move your opponents around and make the fight tactically what you want it to be. Igni shocks its opponents and holds them back while the attack is in force. This can give you distance in fights, it can bring you in close for a finishing blow, and as an example of the way that the tactics work in combat. There is traps that Geralt can set that also stuns opponents, and that is another aspect of the game that you have to learn. When to use a trap, where to drop a trap, how to lure an opponent, and it all is an exciting part of what The Witcher 3's combat has to give. Mutagens are an aspect of the game which allows you to subvert Geralt's abilities, mainly in terms of movement. So his speed gets increased with certain potions, certain mutagens. His stamina can be affected on leaps and rolls and dodges. It's an aspect that is really enjoyable. Something that they've thought about and affects the game if you let it. I'm sure that you could play the game without using the mutagens, but it helps you to have boosts at certain times against certain opponents. And I'm sure that if you played it on its max difficulty, the game would require you to use mutagens to boost your abilities. Just while I speak about movement, the dodging and the combat circles that you make while you're in a combat mode is what you'd normally expect from a game like, if you compare it to Assassin's Creed, it's very similar to that, where you have this circular movement around your opponent where you stalk an opponent. I don't mind that as much. I quite like it because it keeps everything in field of view and allows you to use your combat strikes to reach the whole sides of the map while you're in that mode. It allows for tactical fights, tactical combat. That is a perk in the game and makes the game feel well-rounded. It's nice to see that Geralt's storyline as a monster hunter plays a part in the story and plays a part in the combat. It feels like all of the combat in The Witcher 3 is designed to make you as the player feel like a Witcher and allows you to decide how you want to go about killing monsters. There is folklore and a design set of how you meant to kill a monster and how you can easily use its weaknesses against it, which ties into the folklore and the story. But you as a player decides ultimately. You can fight a monster for an hour and pick it off. You can go in guns blazing and swing your big sword around until your foe is dead. It really allows the player, and I really like that aspect of The Witcher 3. You decide how you hunt and kill monsters. That is all to the credit of The Witcher and to CD Projekt Red. I think that this game, in terms of gameplay, stands up with titles that you will be familiar with if you're a fan of the genre in general. So comparisons would be to Assassin's Creed, Batman Arkham Asylum series. The combat is very similar to those two games, but it does feel that there is a free flow. I'd say as close to the closest comparison to the game would be Arkham, but they have a combat system that is based around combos. Geralt doesn't really have that. He has a free-flowing attack, which is why I compare it to Assassin's Creed. The movement in general feels very stalker, hack and slash, approach, dodge, and that is why I compare it to Arkham, because that is kind of how Batman is too. In general, the combat is free-flowing and is easy to master. It's nice to have an approach where you know what type of monster you're facing or if you lose in a boss fight, you'll know the next time. You learn very quickly how to defeat monsters, what their range of attacks are, how they like to attack you, and you can adjust. And adjusting in fights against monsters lets you win the fight easily sometimes, or it's not quite as much of a challenge as it was the first time round. That's nice because you learn the best way to defeat a tough monster, a tough beast, and that's part of the story of The Witcher, learning to fight monsters, and that is a really cool aspect that's in the game. A gripe and an annoyance that many players find with this style: Geralt can't hop and he can't jump. He can leap from side to side in dodges and clear small amounts of space, but if you have obstacles in a small room, you can't dodge around those obstacles. It's like a brick wall standing in front of you, which means that you do get cornered sometimes in fights, so you have to maneuver yourself while you're in combat. Some people think that's a plus because it gives a realism in terms of it gives you a space to fight in and makes it difficult to get round in small confined spaces. But it's a slight annoyance in that he is a master witcher and he can't leap a table. Another gripe that many players have that takes you out of the game slightly is with roaches spawning. So Geralt has a equivalent of a short-term fast-traveling roach, in that you can spawn your horse wherever you are in game. Spawning the horse does sometimes take you out of the immersive parts of the game because roach will spawn in literally the other side of the map sometimes to you. You can see he's always in field of view, but sometimes he hasn't got a great spawning point, so he'll spawn in random places. And I've seen it in bugs sometimes when he's trying to spawn in, he can spawn in midair, and that's something to be aware of. That can take you out of the game slightly. The controls I found easy to use. I played it on my PC when I sampled the game. It doesn't really suit a mouse and keyboard, I wouldn't say. I used it very sparingly on mouse and keyboard on my PC and quickly went to a controller. I think really it's based around controller play. I think that as it being mainly a port from the PlayStation and Xbox, the PC version really does feel strong and makes you really appreciate the game and its beauty. But in terms of control, I think most people will be at home with a controller. I used a Xbox controller. The graphics is what you'd expect a AAA title to be. The introduction to the world feels grand in its scale. The graphics play a big part in that. Playing it on PC, I was treated to its full fidelity. Very, very beautiful game. The gameplay benefits from that aspect too because it lets you render things in field of view much more easily on a PC. If the settings are turned up, then field of view will be much more expansive. I don't think it's to the detriment of the players because I think that the game's been designed to be very friendly to whatever console you're going to play this game on, but it is something to think about. The score is immense. It really makes you feel the history of the game, and it really puts you into the times and the feel of the times. It pulls you into the game and immerses you. It's a very immersive game in general. The story is so brilliant, but aspects of the story, aspects of the game are all accredited to an amazing score, the overall feel of the world that you are inhabiting as Geralt, and it all plays a big part in bringing you into the game and making you feel that you are the Witcher and these people need you. Sound effects to the game are strong when they need to be, crisp, the audio is fantastic. As an immersive feeling, you do feel like this Witcher fighting against the Lichers. You feel like Witcher fighting against these crazy monsters. The monster sound effects are fantastic. The wave cutscenes tie into the score with the sound effects are seamless. Big thumbs up from me.